Hey, it's Chad Brown. Welcome to the Disability Expert Podcast, where we are here once again talking about all things Social Security disability. I've got my trusty sidekick, Dalton, with me again today. Aaron, how's it going?
Good. Glad to be back.
We're trying to figure out what we're going to do in this episode. We started by thinking, hey, let's talk about how to prepare and how to go through it. And then when we were looking and reviewing some psychological examinations from our former clients, we said, hey, why don't we actually go through and do an episode where we break down an actual psychological consultative examination and go through the different parts. So what we're going to do today is we're actually going to take a real consultative examination that one of our clients had. We're not going to talk about their information, obviously, but we're going to go through the sections. So what we hope is that when we get done today, you'll be able to know not only what to expect in the consultative examination, but actually have the detail about what the different sections are, so that we can help you understand, hey, these are not only the types of things I'm going to be asked to do, these are the types of questions I'm going to be required to answer. So there we go. Consultative examination, psychological. But before we get into that, there's one thing I do want to sort of hit on. One of the things we talked about in the consultative examination episode was what we call the parking lot rule. Aaron, you want to remind our audience what the parking lot rule is? Because it, once again, is going to impact our psychological CEs.
Yes. So the parking lot rule is the examination does not start when you get in the room with the examiner. The examination starts when the wheels of your car touch the parking lot of the building. You will be observed entering the building. You will be observed exiting the building.
Right.
And the examiner is probably going to put in the report either that your presentation in the parking lot was consistent with how you presented in the room,
right,
or if there's inconsistencies and you skipped out to your car afterwards,
right,
that will find its way into the report.
Yeah, I just think it's important for people to understand that you're going to be examined from the time they see you. They don't always look in the parking lot, but I've seen enough of these to know that sometimes they do. So just understand your examination is going to start really when they first lays eyes on you. And that's not just the parking lot. That's also in the waiting room. That's how you interact with staff. Can't reiterate enough. I want to jump to the very end of this. You have to be kind to everyone in these exams.
For sure.
Even it can be a stressful day. A lot of times when you have a psychological consultative exam, it's because you're dealing with severe mental health problems. But you have to be respectful and kind to these folks. And even if they're not, maybe so to you. So right on the heels of that, though, we have another test we tell our clients about called the Sniff test.
Yes.
So what's the Sniff test, and how does it, what the heck's that got to do with psychological CE?
So one of the things the psychological CE is going to be observing and documenting and putting in this report is their sort of personal impressions of you. They're going to be looking at how did you dress? Did you come in clean? Did you have an odor about you? Did you smell like cigarettes or marijuana? Because that could be relevant to their documentation of your mental health symptoms during the exam.
Yeah, and contrary to what many people who use marijuana heavily believe, it has a very strong smell.
There's a distinctive odor, yes.
It's very recognizable, and it's highly unlikely that whatever mask you thought you were going to use to hide it's going to be there. So just be aware of that this is, and we're going to jump right into general observations because that's the first part of a psychological exam. But I think if people sort of understand, you're going to be evaluated not just on the questions you answer, but in some respects, it's a 5 senses test, right?
Yes.
They're going to look at you. They're going to smell and see, do you smell like marijuana? Do you have odor about you? Do you smell like cigarettes? Just be aware of that, because the last thing you want to do is have your case be tanked because you went into the consultative examination smelling like marijuana, and the first impression you gave the examiner was, oh, this person smokes dope. Yeah. Okay. We got the parking lot test in. We got the Sniff test in. If we don't do anything else, I think we did our clients a huge favor today. Okay, so let's go through this. So generally, a psychological evaluation is not, it's not like a counseling session. You're not going to sit down and say, well, how are you today? What have you been going through? How have you been feeling? It's not like that at all. There's tremendous structure to an exam. Typically, what we see is a consultative examination without cognitive testing, that is, without formal testing, an IQ test or something like that, is going to go through about 12 sections. We're going to go through most of those today. Some of them are more detailed than others. But the first takeaway is I think people need to understand this is a very structured exam. And it's going to have components, and it's this pay by the exam examiner is checking his boxes or checking her boxes. So let's start with this. Section 1 is generally going to be what's called general observation. So what's all that about? What are they looking for in this general observations? What kind of things are they going to do there?
So with this one, like we've already touched on a little bit, this is sort of a full sensory exam. It's not just about how you answer the questions. So the examiner is going to be looking at, did you come in with a cane? Did you come in with a walker? Do you have a limp? One thing that's important to understand is these psych CEs are not just ordered for solely mental health cases. I think it's somewhat rare to have a client who doesn't, at a minimum, have an adjustment disorder related to all of the changes that happen with disabling conditions like we've talked about in past episodes. So, mental health may not be the primary reason that somebody's applying. And so the examiner is going to be documenting any physical symptoms that are exhibited during the exam. On the other side of that, they're also looking for indicators of mental health symptoms. Symptoms of anxiety might be you bounce your leg the entire visit. Maybe you don't make eye contact with the examiner because that's just too much for you to do.
Sure.
Speech rate. So are you talking super, super, super fast or giving one-word answers? That could be relevant to a variety of mental health conditions. Same thing, tangential thinking. So does it take you 10 minutes to answer what should have been a yes or no question?
Right. Yes, I think one of the things that comes away from this section 1 is they're going to be observing, and that's the right word. They're just observing you. What do you look like? How tall are you? Are you significantly overweight? Are you significantly underweight? Do you speak quickly? Do you speak slowly? Do you make eye contact? Do you not make eye contact? It's interesting. One of the things I think applies here, a lot of times one of the questions we get asked a lot is, well, what should I wear to the hearing? And I think we need a third rule. I think we need to call this we'll call this the MAGA rule, right? Okay. You might love MAGA. You might think that Trump has saved the world. You might hate MAGA. You might think that Trump is the worst thing since Stalin, right? Like there are lots of strong opinions. Let's use MAGA because MAGA is sort of something people understand. So here's the rule. Here's the MAGA rule, though. You might love Trump. You might hate him. Leave your hat and shirt at home the day of your exam.
The examiner does not need to know who you voted for in the last election. It is not relevant to this exam.
And that applies to other things as well. I mean, you may think Kiss is the greatest rock band ever, and you've worn your 1984 T-shirt everywhere you've gone for everything significant. But the holy T-shirt that from the Kiss concert in Cincinnati in '85 is not probably it's not probably the best time to wear that either. And I think should those things matter? Probably not. I really don't think they should, but they do, and it's an observation. And so what you don't want to do is anything, in my opinion, in the observation stage that intentionally draws negative attention to yourself, whether that's smelling like marijuana or having super strong political positions. I just think it's a time where you need to understand you're going to be observed and they're going to be noted. And it's just common sense in some respects. You wear your, probably need to wear clean clothes. You probably need to dress casually or, whatever's comfortable. A lot of times, you get into issues though, like if people have severe foot problems or they have swelling, like they can't wear shoes. Well, it's also not the day to try to force yourself into your old wingtips that you wore to church 10 years ago. If you wear slides, wear slides. Just in the context of general observations, be aware they're going to be looking at you. And in that looking and observing, they're going to write those things down and they are going to show up and the judge is going to see them at some point. So That's general observations. So the section 2, they're going to look at the current medications. So what are they looking for there?
So the examiner is trying to figure out here, the symptoms that you are displaying during this exam. Are these symptoms that you are having on medications, or is this what you look like unmedicated? So one thing we always advise clients to do, take the medications you normally take the day of the exam as you normally take them. You want to try and present best you can as you are on a standard day. So one thing that can help with the current medications is coming in with a written list of everything you're taking, because if you're on 10 different medications, it can be hard to remember all of those and the doses and everything else. So bringing in that list to give to the examiner or to read off to them so that they can understand, exactly what you're taking to get to this level of functioning.
Yeah, and I think there's 2 takeaways that come away from just the medications itself, and the sort of general takeaways for all CEs, but especially psychological consultative exams, is one, you need to do some preparation before the exam. You're going to be we're okay. If you didn't know before, you know now. You're going to have to tell them your medications. Make a list and write it down. Don't waste 10 minutes in that exam fumbling around saying, "Well, I don't remember this," or "I don't remember that." It just irritates the examiner, who's probably got 10 other exams that day. So, um, do some preparation for some of these things, and one of those is having a good medication list. The other thing, though, is understand you need to include all of your medications, not just your psych meds, because this is also another takeaway is understand, even though this is a psychological consultative exam, the disability case is working around your conditions as a whole. The fact that you take pain medication may not actually be related to your mental health condition, but it could be impacting your mental health conditions, causing drowsiness or sleepiness, or it could impact it. So, I think the takeaway is understand that in this exam, you're not necessarily supposed to limit everything to just your psychological symptoms that you think are being examined.
Right. Let
Yeah.
the examiner figure out what is and isn't relevant.
Yeah. You're just giving information. And here, the information is medications. And it's important that you get them all listed, and you preferably do it beforehand so you don't waste their time. We're going to move on to section 3, which directly ties to this, which is they're going to look at your present illness. So what is that about?
Why are we here? Why are you filing for disability? And so, again, this is not just limited to any mental health symptoms or conditions. This is where it's going to be relevant to tell the examiner, oh, yeah, I had a multi-level back fusion last year, and I also have major depressive disorder.
Right. I think it's just important once again, you need to write down your impairments, the things that you're struggling with, have that list ready. It's perfectly acceptable in that exam when you're asked these questions to say to the examiner, "Hey, just in preparation for this, I wrote some things down. Do you mind if I read it to you?" I mean, the examiner's not going to go, "No, you have to do this from memory." Like
Right.
that's not the point of the exam. So get your illnesses written down, have a list of them, but don't think it's just about ones that are related to mental health or just the ones you think are severe. I mean, if you're primarily dealing with major depressive disorder, but you also have OCD, then you need to tell them that. If you've also had 2 knee replacements, tell them that as well.
Yes.
Yeah.
And the examiner is probably not going to have access to your full medical records. So if you don't tell them about a condition, they're not going to know about it. And saying, I just got this diagnosis last week, but I don't remember what it is not helpful.
Yeah, for sure. So going to go through observations, medicines, present illness. Next thing they're going to do is they're going to get a personal, family, and social history. So what in the world is that all about?
So here they're looking for kind of big picture background information. Do you have relatives who have similar conditions or diagnoses? What was life like growing up? Do you have a trauma history that's impacting you today? What's your current living situation? Are you in a bad living situation that's going to be impacting what they're seeing during the exam? Or are you, stably housed? Do you have somebody that's helping you day to day with things?
Yeah, I think here you're just once again saying, this is who I am and what sort of, you know, where I am in terms of where I live, who's with me, who's supporting me. Um, just once again, you need to be accurate. They're going to jump straight from personal social history into educational history and work history. It's sort of self-explanatory here. They want where you went to school, your level of education, and your work history. What are some takeaways, though, that people need to make sure they understand in this section of questions?
A couple of really important things, specifically with the educational history, is going to be, did you complete high school? Were you in a learning plan, IEP, 504 behavioral plan? Did you get a certificate of high school completion rather than a diploma? Did you use vocational rehabilitation to find your first job? So really, they're looking for things that could impact your mental health today, your ability to read, write, critical thinking, and also your work history. Did you have a 30-year job before something happened, or have you always sort of struggled to maintain steady employment?
Right. And I think here you're looking at once again, you need to have this prepared.
Yes.
This needs to be prepared before you ever go into the exam, and it needs to be accurate. And especially with education, like you need to know your educational level. If you didn't graduate high school, you didn't graduate high school. If you graduated high school with a GED, technically that's the same, but that's something the examiner should know. And I think with work history, what you need to understand is, you know, if your work history is straightforward, this is pretty simple. If your work history is not straightforward, you need to take some time and think about it. If you had a lot of jobs, you frequently lose jobs because, let's say, you have bouts of depression or you have issues with bipolar. Saying, "Well, I just had a lot of jobs I don't remember," that's not near as impactful as being able to, list out the jobs that you had. Once again, you can do this before the exam.
For sure.
They're going to go from education, work history to criminal, military, and medical history. We've talked about medical history quite a bit already. I think there you need to make sure that specifically to your mental health symptoms, once again, here we're looking for not a full medical history, but pertinent medical history, which means if you've had hospitalizations for suicide attempt, if you've been in outpatient therapy, you've been in inpatient therapy, you see your psychiatrist every week. These are things that you can't omit. Like you have to get those into this exam so they know. Same with significant physical history. If you had a back fusion, if you had a significant car accident with a traumatic brain injury, those are relevant. Military, you just need to get it right. You need to, were you in the service? When did you serve? What was your level of discharge? Please don't lie if you had a dishonorable or less than honorable discharge. Just be accurate. What about criminal history, though? Because this is something people aren't expecting in this exam, but they're going to be asked a criminal history. What do you advise people on the criminal history?
Once again, be honest, be straightforward with the examiner. If you've had multiple periods of incarceration, go ahead and have those dates ready because that can be relevant to the examiner. It's not necessarily harmful to your case. If you have an intermittent explosive disorder and you've had multiple criminal charges related to that, it can actually sort of back up what you're telling the examiner about why you're not able to work. And the odds are the judge is probably going to know about criminal history anyway from other records. So once again, we're trying to build consistency here among the different records.
Yeah, I mean, I think some of the takeaway in a very broad sense, judges are looking for consistency, they're looking for supportability, and they're looking for inconsistencies as well. And I've been in a lot of hearings over the years where some relatively insignificant component of a consultative exam the client lied about, whether they just forgot or whether they were embarrassed or whether they just lied. I mean, sometimes people just lie. And all of us failing to understand that your credibility is assessed across the board.
Yes.
And credibility in the easiest way for the judge to examine your credibility is whether you're honest in things that don't matter. Because if you're honest in these things, then okay, you're credible. But if you lie about it, what else are they lying about? And it's not hard for them to go from there to they're not credible and I think they're lying, therefore I don't believe their symptom that they're saying are linked to their disability. Section 8, daily activities and functioning. This is ADLs. Talk a little bit about that. What are they trying to figure out there?
ADLs are huge. Everybody in Social Security uses ADLs. The consultative examiner looks at them. The judge looks at them. We will talk about them at the hearing.
Right.
So the examiner is trying to figure out big picture, what does a typical day look like for you? And so I think clients sometimes sort of have a hard time understanding what the examiner is asking about there. And so the knee-jerk reflex is to say, well, I don't do anything.
Yeah.
That's probably not the case.
Yeah, for sure.
So if you're playing Candy Crush for 8 hours a day, that is doing something, and it's relevant for the examiner to know.
Yeah, sure.
Same thing if you're in the middle of a really bad depressive episode and you have been spending a lot more time in bed. Try to quantify that for the examiner. I spend 8 hours a day in bed. I spend 10 hours a day in bed. That's very relevant. On the flip side, if there are some things that you're able to do around the house, I do 1 load of laundry a week just to keep me in clean clothes. I fix a sandwich or I microwave TV dinner. That looks very different than just saying, well, I cook.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're going to get into this actually in our next episode because we're going to talk about how you interact with doctors in your case. But I think the big takeaway here, especially with ADLs, and this is going to be across the board, not just in this exam, is you need to be detailed, and you need to be detailed with examples.
Yes.
I spend this number of hours a day doing X. I'm unable to do, I'm unable to stay focused. I can't focus myself to complete a 30-minute TV show. I find myself distracted, or I try to read, I tried to read my Bible and I find myself having to go back in 5 or 6 verses because I can't remember. The point is, just generalities don't help. Be specific, but be specific with an example that's related to your daily life. And you're going to do this in ADL. So we're going to get through these. We may have to revisit this in another show, but let's get through at least the components so people will know. Mental health history. We sort of hit this in medical history. Mental health history, 2 things I want people to know. One is it needs to be, especially hospitalizations, treatment, need to be accurate. Write it down beforehand. One of the things, though, I think people sort of shy away from is with mental health, there's often causation.
Yes.
So you have someone who has maybe a history of abuse, they witnessed trauma. You need to be willing to not talk about that in detail, but I mean, if you served in the military and you were in combat and you have PTSD, your mental health history may have started at that point. So not only do you need to give a beginning point in your history, you also need to be able, when there's causative factors that led to this, don't be afraid to tell them that. They're not going to go into detail with you. That examiner does not want to talk about your traumatic experience of being raped, but it is relevant and part of your mental health history, and that's where it's going to come in. Once again, prepare beforehand. They're going to do a mental status exam. This is not a objective exam, so to speak. Generally, what are they going to go through in this mental status exam?
So with the mental status exam, they're going to look to see, are you oriented to the date, time, location, why you're there? How's your speech? Like we talked about earlier, is it fast? Is it slow? Sort of thought process and reasoning abilities. Are you able to kind of connect the dots or have good judgment, display good logical thinking skills?
Then they're going to do a cognitive response battery 11, which is, it's not formal IQ testing. Tell them what that's going to be. Because I think in the mental status exam and in the cognitive response battery, the reality is you just need to be accurate and you need to be honest. But what are they actually testing in that cognitive response battery?
So this is the one that catches people off guard a lot of times. They're going to ask you to do some math. There might be counting numbers by 3, so 3, 6, 9, or counting backwards by 7, 193. They might give you 3 words and then 5 minutes later ask you to tell them what those 3 words were. And they're going to be taking notes about, could you remember the 3 words? Right. Did you need a hint to remember the words? Sometimes there's proverbs that they ask you the meaning of don't throw, people who live in glass houses shouldn't throw rocks, and then they'll ask you what that means.
Right, sure.
And so they're sort of testing there just your ability to answer some basic questions. Maybe how do you deal with the stress of being asked to do math for the first time in a year?
Sure. I just think people need to understand this is coming. A lot of times it comes to the end of the exam.
Yes.
and you've sort of been there answering questions for 20 or 30 minutes, and now all of a sudden you have to do math exercises, just be prepared. It's okay to take a breath. It's okay to say, hey, let me think a second. Don't feel pressured, but just do the best you can in that, because it's really, the exam's going to show what it's going to show. And then finally, they're going to make diagnostic impressions and give a summary. Really nothing you can do about that. It's going to be there. Your attorney's going to need to figure out what to do with that. Wow.
It's a lot.
It's a lot. Golly, we should have done 2 episodes. All right, maybe next time. Okay, that's it. I'm dead on time. My great producer Heidi has given me we're done today. Psychological consultative exams are a big part of the Social Security disability process. And if you're scheduled for one, go back through this podcast, go back through these sections, think about it. There'll be some show notes as well. But think about, how can I prepare for that exam to not only make it easier for the examiner, having your medications, having your medical history, being polite and friendly to work with, right? To the best you can. It's a stressful situation. And just be prepared to just tell them what's going on. Even though it's a stranger, even though it's difficult, it's important. It does impact your case. And I think if you sort of understand what's coming, you can do a lot better job with it. All right, Aaron, that's it. Thanks for another episode of the Disability Expert Podcast. That's a wrap. Subscribe and tune in next time. We're going to talk about how doctors impact disability cases.